government is a child of the party, not a parent. I once again reiterate the supremacy of our revolutionary mass party, ZANU-PF. The policies, programs, and projects, as well as strategy documents we implement as government officials, are a direct result of party resolutions, party decisions, and directives. The government is a child of the party, not a parent.
You, President Emerson Mnangagwa, because you worked with him, do you think that he pushed through the 2030 agenda?
Pushing through what? And what I'm going to say, Mnangagwa is technically fight. Once those who are veterans, they say the rapera bus, what to pay them come? He's hanging around, but the truth of the matter is, he's gone. The most critical branch in ZANU-PF is that thing called war veterans.
But you said he is the father of security.
He is not father. How old is he to be father of everyone?
He said he's the father of...
he let him see how the father is going to go away. He talks of father. To those fathers also. Are they not the same age?
Also, I want to say welcome to those that may join us for the first time. Please subscribe to the channel. You won't regret that. Make sure that you thumbs up the video as well, share with others. To my regulars, you know the game, okay? And I just want to remind you that I love you deeply. Thank you for all your support. I appreciate you once again. Moving on.
Of the retired generals who have been most emphatic in their opposition to this. Perhaps the first that we have ever seen a fraction or faction, if you want to call it, at least one might say security forces for that matter, most of them were veterans for that matter, speaking very boldly against the party, against the state, and indeed against Mnangagwa himself. Prison, welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Mandaza, and thank you, viewers and followers and listeners. And I really want to appreciate my addition to this platform. I respect it. I think it's doing a great work, and we are in a situation where we have a real national crisis. So I will try to address what Professor Ibu Mandaza just said. For me, we can analyze, we can bring the academic structures and the ideological structures and the philosophical structures and analyze. But what we are facing at the moment comes down to two things: the defense of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and something that has been silent, the defense of the 2028 election. Why I say that, we are at a situation where obviously there is mutilation of the Constitution, as Dr. Dendere was saying, the vandalization of the Constitution. But when we say that, we are also looking at what the Constitution itself says about incumbents benefiting from any amendments. It's not that constitutions can't be amended, they can be amended, but there is a way that is being violated here. So it is people trying to defer the 2028 election, and that election has to be defended. That is point number one, together with the Constitution. So when retired Liberation War commanders stepped forward last week to oppose CAB 3, as it is now called, the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3, they did more than just submit a petition to Parliament. They challenged the political temperature of the entire debate. As some speakers have said, temperatures have been rising, fragmented voices, and people just expressing their disgruntlement across the political divide, across the societal divide. But for months, opposition to CAB has been easy to dismiss as the predictable complaints of opposition parties and civic activists that are known, or this is Maduka, I saw all this posting, or Maduka strategy and all those kind of things. And constitutional lawyers have just been dismissed as lawyers. But with this development in Zimbabwe's polarized political environment, such objections are often quickly reduced to partisan noise. So that's what you see. But when voices emerging from within the establishment, from the Liberation War generation itself, beginning to question the legality and legitimacy of the proposed amendment, then something is shifting. This is what we are seeing. The debate ceases to look like a familiar contest between government and opposition. It begins to look like a national constitutional moment, which it is. This is something that affects every single person called Zimbabwean, born today and beyond 100 years. This is a critical matter. And that moment has already begun to embolden citizens across the country, in the diaspora and everywhere. Civic groups that had been mobilizing quietly, now, because of what the generals and the retired civil servants did, people linked to the struggle, they now feel less isolated. Legal challenges filed in the courts now appear part of a broader constitutional struggle. It used to be just like, 6 veterans and Maduka in court. But now everything is coming back to be a bigger shape of a national struggle. This is how the liberation struggle itself started, as fragmented, demonized terrorists, until we got into the 70s, where this becomes a coordinated national solidarity movement. Even within political structures traditionally associated with the ruling establishment itself, now questions are beginning to surface. And this is very, very important. People just want to collectivize and say ZANU-PF. The biggest victim of this scam is actually ZANU-PF itself. If you do look at what just happened on the 16th, on the 17th of this month, that letter written to DCC chairmen and all these people, ordered to produce unanimity reports and submit them as public opinion. This is not what ZANU-PF supporters want. They find themselves having a chairman to write a letter on their behalf and in their name saying this is unanimously agreed upon. So to then look at it as just opposition versus ZANU-PF, there is a problem. So within ZANU-PF, there are people that are disgruntled. Many, in fact, the majority, if I may say, this is something sponsored by an oligarchy, a minority of people that have gathered to themselves billions of dollars, and they are using that money to try and sway public opinion. But even ZANU-PF is a victim. So what began as a scattered resistance is starting to resemble something a lot larger. The question now is whether that momentum can be organized into a coherent national effort. And this is where the moment that Zimbabwe has entered. The political significance of the retired general's intervention lies not only in what they said, but in what their voices represent. They are representing the suffering Zimbabweans. For decades, Zimbabwe's liberation war generation has been closely intertwined with the ruling party's legitimate narrative. We all know that. Their moral authority derives from the sacrifices made during the liberation struggle for independence. When figures from that same generation now warn that the constitutional changes risk undermining the democratic principles for which the liberation struggle was fought, the debate enters a new territory, which is where we are now. It is no longer easily framed as opposition politics. It becomes a question about the foundations of the republic itself. So this matter has brought us to the foundations of what we call Zimbabwe, that name that Michael Mawema in 1962 came up with to say this, let's fight for a country that we're going to call Zimbabwe. That's the republic that we attained in 1980. And its foundation is now the center of debate. This is what the generals are bringing forth. But moments like this can easily dissipate if they are not carefully organized. This is what everybody has been saying here. Momentum alone does not produce change. What produces change is direction. The suspicion problem that we have in the country, Zimbabwe's political landscape is fractured. There are ZANU-PF supporters who are deeply uncomfortable with the proposed constitutional changes, but remain wary of being seen as working alongside opposition groups. So they share the same complaint, but then they are saying, if I do this, I might be seen as supporting Chamisa and supporting the opposition. That's the danger. Then there are opposition supporters who suspect that elements within the ruling party's internal politics may be driving some of the resistance. So they basically say, oh, we're not going to be used again like what happened in 2017. I'm not going to join a factional war. So if people are criticizing this from ZANU-PF, they want our support so that they can benefit. So these are the realities that we have. And therefore, fear being drawn into factional battles. So within the opposition itself, there are long-standing rivalries that we know. Nelson Chamisa has publicly dismissed the Constitutional Defense Platform and later the Constitutional Defense Forum for Beauty and the collective efforts of the likes of Ngarivume and so on. Douglas Monzora's MDCT, occupies its own political space. Love Momaduku, to his credit, he has been fighting this constitutional matters for a long time with his National Constitutional Assembly. They have their own long-standing constitutional activism that is there. And then we have other civic formations mobilizing independently. You talked about the churches coming in, the Catholic bishops and so on. And these are forces that are all looking at one thing, perhaps except Nelson Chamisa. To be honest, I don't understand whether he's just a minimalist of this whole constitutional debate or he's something else. But we know that everybody else seems to be outraged by what is happening. And but the differences that we're talking about here are real. They cannot simply be wished away. People are pursuing different things. But if CAP3 has exposed anything, it is that Zimbabwe has reached a moment where political actors with very different histories are suddenly confronting the same constitutional danger. This is very important. The differences are real, they are there, the interests, the ideological leanings, they are real, but we are confronting the same constitutional danger as a people. The challenge now is how to act together without pretending those differences do not exist, because they do. So a single issue constitutional front. So the solution may lie in something simpler than many people may imagine. Zimbabwe does not require a grand political coalition. It requires a single issue constitutional front. This is defense of election 2028 and defense of the constitution, pure and simple. ZANU-PF has cluttered this bill with 22 extra clauses, and the clutter is very deliberate to distract people from exactly what they are doing. Extend Emerson Mnangagwa's term. It's not even about 2030. We had Paul Mnangagwa clearly explaining what they want to do. Before the 4th of September, if they manage to make this thing into a law, then whatever Mnangagwa has said from 2023 is still going to count because it's less than 3 years. So that's going to be taken away. And then they will say, we have a 7-year term, which might as well start from 2020, from September this year. Well, once this becomes law, that takes Mnangagwa to 2033. This is the real game plan. So we are looking at narrowing this as much as we can and forget about all these differences and petty differences. And we have to confront this thing for what it is. Defense of election 2028 and defense of the constitution itself. Such a front would not seek to merge political parties. There's no point doing so. It would not attempt to resolve ideological disagreement. There's no point doing so. It will not attempt to campaign for electoral advantage. This is not time to mobilize for supporters and to outshine each other and grow political parties. No. What we are looking at is a mandate that would deliberately narrow, which is deliberately narrow and which is temporary, but it's a national cause. And then when we fix this problem, when we defend election 28 and defend the constitution, which is the foundation of the republic, we can go back to our political parties and mobilize, and we can push our ideologies. 2 objectives only: defend the constitution, defend election 2028. Everything else can wait. What defending the constitution means: The 2013 Constitution established certain foundational democratic principles. Among them is the principle that the President of Zimbabwe is elected directly by the people through universal suffrage. And this is being attacked. CAP 3 proposes altering that structure by allowing Parliament to elect the President. This is what we are fighting. This is not going to happen. You asked me what is the fate of the bill. The bill is going to fail one way or the other. It's just not going to happen. Professor Maduka, I was talking to him as well, he's very confident that the block will come from the courts. I am looking at the courts, I'm looking at a political situation, and I think it doesn't matter what the courts will do. There will be a political block to this bill. It just simply cannot happen and will not happen. This would fundamentally shift the sovereign rights of Zimbabweans to choose their head of state, and that is unacceptable. Zimbabweans have a tradition of electing their own president, and that tradition is going to be protected. Whether Mnangagwa likes it or not, this is exactly what is going to happen. The Constitution also establishes predictable electoral cycles to ensure periodic renewal of democratic legitimacy. What an election means is power goes back to the people. That period when an election is announced and when we vote, and then the newly elected people get sworn in. So power is given away for 5 years, and power is given back to the people for the period of election, and power is surrendered back to the elected politicians. That's what it is, and it's not going to change. Proposals that effectively allow the current parliament to extend its own tenure, that is not going to be acceptable. It is not acceptable. It's not going to happen. And potentially to elect the president itself. That alters that constitutional architecture that we have in profound ways. And this is why the generals are coming in. That kind of madness cannot simply be allowed to happen in a democratic country. Defending the Constitution, therefore, means insisting that these foundational principles are not quietly rewritten by a group of people, unelected people like Ziyambe, without the consent of the people of Zimbabwe. What defending the 2028 election means, this is the second objective that I'm talking about. It is clear. Zimbabweans voted in 2023 with the understanding that the next national election would occur in 2028. That's a legitimate expectation, and you know the principle of legitimate expectation. It is also covered in the Constitution. People legitimately expect power to be returned to them in 2028, and they will exercise that power to elect the new establishment, the new leadership. Any constitutional maneuver that removes or postpones that election fundamentally alters the contract between voters and their representatives. So even imperfect elections, people who say, in Chamisa's argument, that elections will be stolen and rigged and all these things, even imperfect elections serve a critical democratic functions. They still provide citizens with the opportunity to renew or withdraw political authority. That is regardless of what interpretations may be made out of the process itself in terms of fairness and freeness. But that fundamental right cannot be taken away from citizens. We can work on correcting freedom and fairness of elections, but we cannot take away the right of Zimbabweans to vote. So this is where people are converging at the moment. Protecting the 2028 election timetable therefore becomes essential to preserving the integrity of Zimbabwe's constitutional system. So the 4 pillars already emerging right now, encouragingly, resistance to CAP 3 is already emerging across several fronts. I will not repeat what other panelists have said here. There is legal resistance. Court challenges have been filed questioning the legality of the proposed amendment and the constitutional procedures required for such changes. Secondly, Liberation War veterans and retired commanders have spoken, whose intervention has reframed the debate totally in terms of defending the democratic values of the liberation struggle. Thirdly, civic mobilization is going on, including petitions, community meetings, and growing calls for peaceful protest marches defending this constitution. Fourth, political actors across different parties, each raising concerns about the implications of the amendment. Even people like Rutendo Matanyire, who normally would support ZANU-PF in a very irrational manner. I was reading something he wrote today, just saying, what is this about a term that has no time limit. It's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense for someone to argue that you can put any number of years to a term because the constitution doesn't have any years to the term limit. So you have people across political parties sharing the same views. Individually, each pillar has a limited outreach out of the 4 pillars that I just mentioned. But together, they begin to resemble a national constitutional defense movement. This is where we are going. So the role of the diaspora, I'm part of that. And maybe some of the panelists here. One group uniquely positioned to contribute to this effort is the Zimbabwean diaspora. Diaspora communities operate in environments where political speech carries far fewer personal risks. I get a lot of information. People think sometimes I'm amazing, as Professor Mandaza was saying, but I'm talking to people that are just giving me information to say this is happening, whether they're in the establishment, in the public service, or in the civil service, or just ordinary citizens. They pass on information to say, you got the voice, you can speak for us, this is what is happening, how can this happen? With the whole process to this bill getting into cabinet, I got a lot of information of things that were just twisted, and I had to put that on social media. So this is the role of the diaspora. We carry less risks, and we have to take that advantage and fight alongside everybody else. The diaspora also possesses networks capable of engaging the international institutions. Somebody was talking of Professor Raftopoulos there, and the engagement of international institutions, media platforms, and global civil society organizations, and so on. So strategically, diaspora advocates can amplify domestic voices. That's all we want to do, amplify what is happening at home. We're not campaigning for political positions. We are not fighting to be included in the feeding trough, as we see some comments saying. We're just here to amplify the voice of the voiceless back home, because we're still Zimbabweans, without exposing other citizens inside to unnecessary danger. We have seen the beatings, we have seen the victimization, and we are trying to make sure that we can amplify that voice and lessen the danger for those that are on the ground. In constitutional struggles around the world, diaspora communities have often played an important supporting role in internationalizing debates that domestic actors are trying to advance. And that's all we're doing. So the clock is ticking now. There is also a practical reality that cannot be ignored. Parliament has gazetted a 90-day public consultation process. We've got about 70 days to go for CAP 3. That process is already underway. So this consultation window represents a critical opportunity for citizens to express their views formally through petitions, which is happening. I've done mine, many people have done theirs, and we saw one from the retired generals. Public submissions, meetings, and peaceful demonstrations. So once that window closes, the legislative process will move rapidly. Moments like this do not last indefinitely. So this is what people should just know, that we have to take advantage within the next 70 days and make sure that the voice of the people is resolute and this thing is stopped. This is not a regime change struggle. The most important principle for many constitutional, for any constitutional front to embrace is clarity of purpose. This struggle is not about removing President Mnangagwa from office. It is not about overthrowing ZANU-PF either. It is not about opposition parties positioning themselves for electoral advantage. Those political battles will come in their own time. The issue now confronting Zimbabwe is far, far more fundamental. It is whether the constitutional rules governing how power is obtained and exercised remain stable. When constitutions begin to change primarily to accommodate political ambition, every political actor eventually becomes vulnerable. Defending the Constitution, therefore, protects not only the citizens, but the long-term stability of the state itself. This is the moment Zimbabwe must recognize now. The retired general's revolt has already shifted the national conversations. What happens next will determine whether that moment becomes a turning point or simply another episode in Zimbabwe's long constitutional history. If the emerging coalition of veterans, lawyers, civic groups, political actors, churches, citizens, and if these groups can focus on the two essential objectives before them, a powerful constitutional defense movement, they have to take shape. But if suspicion, rivalry, and partisan calculation prevail, this moment may pass. I don't think it will pass. I think people are have had enough of this nonsense that we have seen. And I'm very, 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 very optimistic that we have come to a defining moment in terms of the misadventure that Mrs. Yambi Siambi has started, and Virginia Mabiza, the Attorney General. I mean, this is a calculated law of kind of scam, but I think people will confront it in equal measure. Zimbabwe's constitution is ultimately not protected by institutions alone. It survives because citizens insist that the rules governing power remain subject to the consent of the people. And right now, that consent is being tested. The choice facing Zimbabwe is therefore very, very simple. Defend the constitution. Defend the 2028 election. Everything else can wait and resume after that defense. And I thank you so much, Professor Mandaza, for giving me this opportunity. I thank you so much, panelists, for the patience to listen to my presentation. That's all I had to say for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rizan. I just have two quick questions immediate after your presentation. The first is Mnangagwa was born in 1938. He's 88 this year. In 2030, he'll be 92. And if he's given another 7 years, which is 1993, 2033, he'll be almost 100. Okay. So to put it bluntly, surely this is less about Mnangagwa than about those around him who are seeking power through the back door on the back of 300 parliamentarians.
Exactly.
Is that obvious to everybody? That this is less about Mnangagwa than about these hangers-on to Uganda who want to get into power? That's the first question.
The narrative and the pretext has always been continuity, stability, and development attributed to the person of Emmerson Mnangagwa. And then the sloganeering is around that narrative. But that narrative, like I said in my presentation, is funded, is by people that are protecting their interests, capital to be precise. So these are people that have looted, that have stolen, and they want perpetuity. So it's not exactly about Mnangagwa, like you rightly say. If we go to his actual date of birth, he is 88 now. And adding another seven years, you're looking at, I don't know, 95, 96, if we look at what they're trying to do. So the real question is, they want to narrow the electoral authority to parliament because they can buy. You have seen it. They've given 500 cars just to the army alone. So a parliament of 310 can be bought anytime. We saw it with the ZIFA elections. What did Chifayo say? 167 councillors. Each of you will get a car if you vote in Magwizi. So these are things they can control. So once they win it through this narrative, and the bill passes, and parliament is the one to control, they can control parliament and keep the power with or without Mnangagwa. That's the clear plan, and this is why this thing has to be stopped.
Yeah, that's why my second question, very briefly, is it good enough to stop CAB 3 without having to insist on 2028 elections, especially since, in our view, we want, through this platform, that the elections in 2023 would never be free, fair, nor credible. Are we going to repeat that? Shouldn't we be talking about, if this CAB 3 is defeated, then we must plan for either for a reform of the electoral laws in the same vein, and or subscribe to the National Transition Authority. What's your view? As a means, yes.
That's a very good question, Professor Mandaza. And the defense of election 2028 is also the defense of the process of that election. So the repeat of what we saw in 2023, whether it's the media space, the democratic space, independence of ZAC and all these other commissions and people that are referees in matters of election. So when we are defending election 2028, you are saying on condition that it is free and fair. And if that process is going to keep the time frame with changes that are collective from other parties, if a political solution in terms of how do we approach to 2028 will be arrived at as a consensus from the people, then that is a different story. But what we are looking at now is to say we cannot defend the Constitution without defending what it entails in terms of the matter that is within this bill. And what is in this bill is that there is a legitimate expectation that in 5 years we are going for another election. And if we say we want to overrule that and we still want to, then we empower the other group to say, oh, well, if you're also not worried about 2028, then you are just like us. We are also not worried about it. We want 2030. So you want something else. In fact, to be honest, I have actually gotten a submission sent to me regarding the transitional authority and so on to say we're actually pushing the same argument and so on. That's why I'm saying, as you know, in my presentation was like, everything can wait. If we manage to defeat this bill in 2026, as I believe we will, then we got this period up to 2028 to fix electoral reforms and other things that affect our elections in a way that we either are all satisfied that we have actually the right people. We do have the right structures. It's just the people that are appointed in the structures are appointed unfairly. So we're talking of the chairperson of ZEC and things like that. So once we come to a point where these people are independently selected or appointed, then we can be talking of something else. But if we try to mix the battles, in my opinion, we're just going to empower the other side.
Thanks, Reason. I just want to take note. You talked of a national constitutional defense movement. There is something for an overarching name for this process.
Mataura chaizvo kuti nyika kana isina bumbiro romutemo hapana chatakarwira. Matauriro amaita apa ndiyo chaiyo yokuti isu takutorwa sevakadzi hatichatorwa sevarume. Mamiriro yaita zvinhu izvi hazvichada kutaurirana izvi, zvakuda pfuti. Ndo mamiriro yazvaita, nokuti kutaurirana hakuna zvazvinobatsira. Zvakutoda pfuti. Makomuredzi mamwe tinawo achiri mukushanda vari kusevha, pakuda kutorwa action hombe apa, kwete zvokungoswera tichitaura tiri apa, pakuda kutodzokera musango isunungurwe futi kochipiri. Ndo zvakudikana. Handiti vaitaura kuti endai moisungirira tozouya toisunungurawo. Saka isu vanonoka kuisunungura, saka takuda kuchivaratidza kuti vaone kuti zvomusango zviya hazvina kupera, nokuti kana nyika yabiwa so zvayaitwa izvi inofanira kudzokera kuvaridzi vaene. Zviri kuitika apa izvi hazvisirizvo, hazvifadze munhu wese. Kana mubereki akazvinzwa haafare nozviri kuitika apa. Saka taikumbirisa chaizvo kuti kutaura kwamaita Comrade Magona kuti takutorwa sovanhu vaye madhonza, hatichisiri varume, ndo zviri kuitika apa. Saka pakuda kutofungisisa strereki kuti way forward ndoipi, but izvi hazvidi kutaurirana izvi. Zvakutoda kutoti dzibamuke, ndo chaizvo dzikabamuka, aziva kwake.